It's no secret that artificial intelligence is a super popular topic right now, and you really can't get away from it no matter where you look. Countless tech companies have sunk billions of dollars in resources and people into developing their own AI or AI-related tools. Every week, it seems like there's some new announcement about AI popping up out of nowhere. From OpenAI's ChatGPT, to Google's Bard, to Microsoft's AI-integrated Bing, there's no shortage of these AI-related systems. And what often comes with the discourse on these AI-related tools are endless articles about the dangers of AI. And truth be told, a lot of those dystopian concerns are real, and quite frankly, a bit frightening to think about. Deepfakes can be maliciously wielded to spread misinformation or even create non-consensual sexual content. AI has been frequently touted as a potential replacement opportunity for quote-unquote unskilled labor. And dozens, if not hundreds, of generative AI tools have been displacing and devaluing creative artists with plagiarized, low-effort content. And that's just scratching the surface of the potential damage that AI has done and could do. But despite all these dangers, I wanted to think for a moment. Are there actually ways we can use AI for the betterment of our society and ourselves? Well, most certainly yes. And we already have been using AI in a lot of positive ways that people don't think or know about. For example, AI programs and algorithms are often used in the scientific field to generate useful data or extrapolations for researchers. AlphaFold is a program by DeepMind that can accurately predict protein structures, a breakthrough that has accelerated development of new medicines. And these positive use cases don't have to be as life-changing as that either. AI can be used in more simple ways too, like helping people develop workout plans catered to their own goals and strengths, or providing people with useful voice assistants that enhance their everyday life. Granted, these all probably come at the cost of data mining users, but that isn't the fault of AI. Rather, it's the companies that run them. Obviously, AI as a concept and AI in practice is complex and nuanced enough to the point that we can't just call it good or bad. So when I saw this Twitter thread a few months ago by an artist named Michelle Huang, I was intrigued. She goes over a process in which she trains an AI chatbot on her childhood journal entries in an attempt to engage in conversation with her so-called inner child. And she kind of frames the experience as therapeutic and healing, noting that this AI experiment of hers can be used for mental health, career counseling, and more. While I can't speak on the actual effectiveness of inner child therapy, I should make the distinction that this AI experiment I'm about to do a bit of a deep dive on is in no way a substitute for real, trained psychiatric help. But that doesn't mean I don't see the potential benefits of talking to your past self like this, which is why I'm going to try this experiment out for myself and see if I can find any value in it. Of course, this isn't an actual scientific experiment. Let me be clear about that. My findings here today aren't meant to be taken as gospel. Rather, it's to perhaps encourage you to try this experiment out for yourself, or to seek mental health treatment if you find this video illuminating in some way. This is especially pertinent after reading a recent study done by the CDC, which found that nearly 1 in 5 US adults reported having ever been diagnosed with depression. I've never undergone a psychological examination, so I can't say that I'm mentally ill or severely traumatized or anything like that. But I do believe that anyone can benefit from therapy, no matter how mentally healthy you are or claim to be. At the very least, I'm going into this experiment with the mindset that I'm going to have some sort of sentimental reflection of my past. My goal is to connect with myself and see why I am the way I am today. What parts of my past are still a big part of me? What parts aren't? who was Reginald exactly 12 years ago? Is he the same person that I remember him being? Or is he someone else entirely? And will this experiment reveal things I hadn't realized about myself? Things that have been buried and lost over the years. Things that can only be understood many years later. Last year, I watched this brilliant yet heartbreaking film by Charlotte Wells called Aftersun. I won't spoil it, as I think it's a really powerful watch if you haven't seen it already. But it's a movie that greatly inspired me to pursue this project. The film is about a young girl named Sophie who goes on vacation with her father Callum at a Turkish resort on the eve of his 31st birthday. Despite Sophie's intelligence, she's oblivious to her father's mental struggles and his depression. Throughout the film, Callum tries to hide his pain as best as he can. One of Aftersun's themes is this idea that you have to reconcile what you think you know about your loved ones with who they really were as people. Passing memories alone aren't enough to define us. We need to pry, scrutinize, and reflect upon our past to truly understand who we really were at that time. And that's why I'm doing this experiment. I want to understand who I was as a person through the actual lens of the past, not through my own cloudy memories of it. I want to go back for just a moment and see what kind of kid I was and how I felt about the world. At the end of the day, I'm still reaching into a muddy past and trying to shape a clear picture from it. But I hope that through this experiment, this AI teaches me something about myself that I couldn't have found out through other means. So without further ado, let's finally jump straight into the creation process and make this AI as close as it could possibly be to my teenage self. Before I begin, I'd like to share a little bit of information on the tools I'll be using for this experiment. It's important to understand what limitations this AI will have, and it's important to set some realistic expectations for my results. I'll be using OpenAI's GPT-3 model, which, like many other popular AIs in the news today, is a large language model, or more succinctly, an LLM. In the most simplistic sense, what this means is that the AI was pre-trained on an enormous amount of text and learning tasks. These LLMs become capable of doing things such as generating text in a human-like fashion. With enough training, LLMs can produce incredible results, such as understanding the syntax and semantics of human language and retaining a vast knowledge about the world. Since I'm not some millionaire or genius coder with unlimited time and resources, I won't be making an LLM myself, which is why I'm using GPT-3. It would be ideal to train my own AI on millions of textual samples from myself, considering the fact that most LLMs are trained on trillions of words. But that's just not a feasible prospect for me. Instead, I'll be training my GPT-3 model with snippets of journal entries that are representative of who I was when I was 15 years old. In other words, I'll be feeding it context that it'll use to model itself after. The reason why I'm only using snippets from my journal entries is because there's a 4,000 token request limit for GPT-3 on OpenAI's Playground tool, meaning that it can only process approximately 3,000 to 4,000 words per request, including the results. This, unfortunately, is what will affect the experiment the most. Giving the AI about only 2,000 to 3,000 words of context means that the model will no way be 100% representative of who I was as a person at that time. The sample size is just too small. There are entire novels written about people out there that don't even come close to encapsulating who they truly were as people. So to hopefully get around this problem, I scoured hundreds of journal entries to gather what I believe represents my thoughts, philosophies, and behaviors at that time. Of course, that presents another problem. If present-day Reginald is the one deciding what he believes past Reginald was like, am I not then just creating a hindsight version of Reginald, and not the true version of 15-year-old Reginald? Unfortunately, I kind of am. But at the very least, I'm training the AI on language and thoughts that come directly from my past self, rather than memories of my past self. This should make the model at least slightly accurate to sounding like me at 15 years old, both in vernacular and in philosophy. There is, however, one issue about AI that just can't be overcome in this experiment. AI, at least the versions we have of it today, is simply incapable of having its own independent, complex thoughts. AI is, for the most part, predictive. It uses the data it was given to predict what results it should show you. It doesn't just come up with things unless it was taught to. That's why generative AI tools usually have a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes something what it is. Like all of those Wes Anderson-styled AI videos that have been littering the web. AI doesn't stop to think why an artist makes the stylistic choices they do. AI just mimics them. All these poor Wes Anderson ripoffs are incredibly derivative of his work. They're just pale imitations limited to the data the AI was given. That's why I don't think that these AI systems will really understand the nuances behind my emotions and pain and life, just like the real 15-year-old me would. It would just copy those emotions, not live them and breathe them. And that's a big difference. But despite all this, I'm still optimistic that I'll learn something useful from this experience. Why? Because this video isn't about creating the most accurate, pinpoint, well-trained AI ever made. It's about reflecting on my past and trying to make sense of myself. And I think this AI can do that. At least, it can present a version of myself I can confront and begin to piece together the threads of myself that have been lost by time. Anyway, you're probably tired of hearing about this AI's limitations, so let's see its capabilities in action. Let's go talk to 15-year-old Reginald. I'm actually really nervous to try this. I honestly don't know what to expect because I don't know how young Reginald will respond to me. All I know is that I carried a lot of pain with me in my teenage years. And although those problems seem quite trivial these days, I think everyone can think back on their youthful angst and know how real and valid that pain still was. And to be dismissive of those very real emotions is incredibly unfair. That's why I'm going to approach this conversation from multiple angles. I'd like to understand where my emotions were coming from, why I felt those emotions, and what I wanted to do about them. This means I'll have to talk to myself multiple times to get some good answers. Since the AI doesn't always respond the same way, I can ask it the same questions several times if necessary. Let's get into our first conversation then. In this first conversation, I actually got some pretty illuminating results. Young Reginald was rather forthcoming about what was on his mind, but I suppose he didn't really have a choice in the matter. He talked a lot about the future, and as you'll see later, this becomes a running theme throughout this experiment. Young Reginald seemed to focus a lot about how he could make an impact on the world. Unsurprisingly, he talked about wanting to write novels, an interest I've had ever since I was a kid, and an interest I'm still pursuing today. What I didn't expect though, was for him to talk about making films and videos. I don't ever remember being interested in being a filmmaker, but it comes up multiple times in these conversations, so I suppose it was a fleeting dream at one point. Young Reginald also talks about being interested in making YouTube videos. But unfortunately for him, that's not something I ended up doing for another 9 years or so. Where I begin to see the cracks in young Reginald's behavior, however, is the latent pressure that he seems to be putting on himself. He seems to think that he's running out of time, which, for a 15-year-old boy, sounds like a silly thought, but it's genuinely what I believed at that time, and it's a cloud that's followed me for my whole life. I hadn't realized just how much this experiment would be like looking in the mirror. I don't put the same pressure on myself that I used to, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel like I was running out of time to chase my dreams. It's a perpetual feeling, even if I know that it's wrong now. It reminds me that young Reginald is still with me in some capacity. This isn't some stranger I'm talking to. It's me. It's genuinely me. One thing I found a bit funny, yet extremely sad though, was young Reginald's fear that he would lose his online friends. For context, I met some guys around my age on RuneScape when I was about 8 years old, so I knew them for about 7 years at this point in time. We did practically everything together. Virtually, of course. We played games, watched movies, talked about life, all of that stuff. But I always had this fear as a kid that those moments would end one day, that it would all come to a stop, and it was a genuine fear that I relived in this conversation. People grow up. People have more responsibilities. People can fade from your life for sometimes no reason at all. And why I now find this fear to be a bit silly was because my fears simply didn't end up coming true. Not even close. To this day, I've known my online friends for nearly 2 decades. And that same fear today would be like thinking my siblings are gonna disappear on me out of nowhere and never talk to me again. It just seems impossible now. Young Reginald didn't have to feel that anxiety and pain. But he did. That's why I ended up telling young Reginald that it all worked out, which he seemed thankful for. The conversation goes on for a little while longer, but I'd like to move on to our second conversation to see if we can find some patterns or learn something new. In this conversation, we see a similar response to what young Reginald talked about in conversation 1. He speaks about how anxious he is about the future, particularly in the sense that he believes that his goals are slipping away, simply because he's running out of time to complete them. Unsurprisingly, his goals remain the same as they are in conversation 1. He's still the same young Reginald, so I'm glad the AI didn't hallucinate new results just for the sake of novelty. In conversation 2, however, I tried to dig a little bit deeper into young Reginald's philosophies by asking him what kinds of themes he would write about in his novels. He has a fairly simplistic take on what themes he would like to cover in his books, such as talking vaguely about concepts like love or loyalty. I would have liked to see him talk about more complex, well-formed ideas, but this simplicity isn't a surprise considering that he's 15 years old. He even makes a note that he's still figuring out his style and voice as a writer, which was absolutely true at the time. Despite this rather accurate truth about my writing skills in my youth, and perhaps even of my adulthood, there was one part in this conversation that made me contemplate the accuracy of this whole experiment. When I asked young Reginald what would happen if he were to fail to reach his goals, he talks about how he would be filled with regret and frustration. He then goes on to say, however, that he understands that life throws some curveballs and things don't always go as planned. He caps this off by saying that he's going to appreciate the moment and not take anything for granted. This might seem like a completely innocuous, unremarkable response, but if you knew who I was when I was 15 years old, I would have absolutely never said that. 15-year-old Reginald was filled with an overwhelming sense of doom, dread, and anxiety. And many of the journal snippets I selected reflected that state of mind. I even told young Reginald that he sounded surprisingly optimistic. This led me to abandon the conversation, as it no longer felt like young Reginald at all. So, knowing that, let's jump ahead and see if the next 3 conversations went any better. In conversations 3, 4, and 5, I decided to take a different approach. I asked young Reginald to write a letter to me about what he hopes I've accomplished in the following 12 years. Once again, young Reginald sticks to the script for the most part. He talks about wanting to maintain a strong bond with his friends. He talks about hoping that I have found my passion and a career to go along with it. And he talks about hoping that I have found clarity past the depression, peer pressure, and uncertainty of my youth. Just like conversation 2, these letters are a bit too optimistic for my liking. But I actually prefer them that way in this format. It reminded me that despite the heavy gloom and anger that clouded my thoughts at that age, I still hoped that things would be different in the future. I suppose the question arises then, are they different? Did I accomplish what 15-year-old me apparently hoped I would? Unfortunately, that's not really a question that can be answered so easily. Goals and dreams are weird that way. They're fluid, malleable, and always changing. Like most people, I'm cursed with the ambition to always do better, even beyond what I'm probably capable of. So reaching a goal always feels like a mere stepping stone rather than an actual accomplishment. For example, I did write a novel like young Reginald hoped I would, but it's a book I have little fondness for, considering that it was primarily written when I was 19 years old. Sometimes I look at it with disdain, knowing I can create something better, which is why it was self-published years later with the hope that I could prove myself right and create something much better one day. If we were to look at goals and dreams only as static objectives that get checked off of a list, then sure, I accomplished what young Reginald wanted me to do, so he should be happy, shouldn't he? The thing is, I don't think he would be, because I'm not satisfied. The difference is that while young Reginald often felt pain and fear about his dreams, I feel excited about them. Where young Reginald felt doubt, I feel certain. Where young Reginald felt dread, I feel determined. Where young Reginald felt suffering, I feel resilient. These days, my goals and dreams are much clearer to me. They feel attainable, in reach. With more life under my belt, with more accomplishments I've done, it reminds me that I can do these things, whereas young Reginald didn't have much to look back on to tell him he was capable. This set of conversations with the AI revealed to me just how vague and underdeveloped my goals really were back then. It makes me appreciative for how much more complex my goals and dreams have gotten over the years. It reminds me that I'm in a much better place today than 15-year-old Reginald could have ever imagined. He would have never fathomed me becoming a high school educator. He would have never guessed that I would then go on to work as a writer, earning enough to work on my own independent writing projects, including this YouTube channel. He would have never expected how much I would nurture my friendships and all of my relationships with my loved ones. So, that's why going into conversations 6 and 7, I wanted to see if I could find any clues from young Reginald to see why I became the way I am. I wanted to see if he was just like me, or if he saw the world differently than I do. Let's jump into conversations 6 and 7, where I asked young Reginald a couple of general worldview questions to examine his thoughts and ideals. In these conversations, I asked young Reginald questions such as, "What do you think of the world?" Or, "What's the most important thing in a person's life?" But these conversations were a bit odd to me, because while young Reginald did answer my questions, there was something off about them. His responses felt too generic. They were filled with platitudes like, "Life is what you make of it," or "Life is all about the journey." It didn't sound like it was coming from a 15-year-old boy who was struggling with his identity. It sounded like a motivational speaker that was cooked up by the AI, not a young, anxious, and lost teenager. There's even a part where he says that it's important to practice self-care and to prioritize your mental health. And while this is true, and while I do think that young Reginald would have actually held that belief, I don't think he would have said it. Because taking care of his mental health was never really at the forefront of his mind. He was cautious about the state of his mental health, but there was never any indication that young Reginald ever took steps to prioritize or practice self-care in these journal entries. So it's a bit unbelievable for the AI to think that young Reginald would have ever talked about self-care. He was quite content with sacrificing self-care in pursuit of his goals, even if he did subconsciously believe that he needed to take care of his mental health. This is where the optimistic AI problem returns. I asked young Reginald what he wanted the world to think of him when he was gone, and he responded by saying he wanted to be remembered for his positive attitude. And just so you guys know how bullshit of an answer that is, let me read you a snippet from one of the journal entries I fed into the AI. I really want to hammer it home that I did not have a positive attitude. On September 11th, 2011, I said, "I don't understand the longing to become older. Growing old is depressing as fuck." And here's another one from December 4th, 2011. "I honestly don't think I have the mental capacity to create fleshed out characters for a full-length novel. It makes me feel useless and pathetic. I'm not even incredibly intelligent. I've sought greatness for such a long time, but I haven't been doing anything to drive myself toward it." Perhaps young Reginald did want to be remembered for having a positive attitude one day. But the reason why I call these AI answers bullshit for this specific set of conversations is because it's clearly avoiding the potential negativity that might have characterized young Reginald's answers. Even when I prompted the AI to be anxious, pessimistic, and brooding, it simply wouldn't act that way. The AI decided to provide me with answers that feel good rather than feel real. And I'm not looking to rewrite young Reginald's history as a time filled with hope and happiness. And I'm certainly not going to pretend that he had a healthy approach to life in general. Because without acknowledging the pain and struggle I went through, I could have never become the person I am today. And so, I continued forward and had a couple more conversations with young Reginald. But instead of going over each of them like I did before, I'd like to take a step back and evaluate this experiment as a whole now. Because conversations 8 through 13 ended up being more or less a re-examination of the same ideas we've already discussed. So, let's go find out what I learned about myself, and whether or not I think this entire process was actually worth it. I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys by saying that I actually went into this video feeling extremely skeptical about the whole AI as therapist idea. And although I'll always emphasize that this experiment was and is in no way a substitute for proper mental health care, I was surprised by how much relief I felt after talking to young Reginald for some time. Because even though the AI model could never really capture the anger, angst, and sadness that permeated my mind during that period in my life, it still made me confront the ideas that led me to those emotions. It still made me reflect on how much my life has changed in the past 12 years. And because of this, It was as if I got to make peace with a broken part of myself that got lost in the shuffle of getting older. I had healed a long time ago, but I realized I never actually got to be thankful for having gotten better. And I think that's something that not all of us have really sat down to think about. Being thankful. We're always so busy chasing the next step, or in the case of a lot of people in this world, we're often focused on the day-to-day survival. There isn't time to be thankful unless you truly, honestly make time for it. And that's what this experiment allowed me to do. Be thankful. Of course, I wouldn't say that I'm in the best mental state of my life, or that I'm the happiest person I know. But I can now say that I'm much more grateful for all that I've done and all that I've been through. At the end of the day, it was present-day Reginald in charge of steering, guiding, and directing these conversations with young Reginald. And when I look back at these conversations with him, I realized that this whole video was never about the AI itself. It was about what the AI allowed me to do. It let me reflect on who I was as a person and how far I've come. And for that, I'm glad I got to do this experiment with the AI tools we have available to us today. I still find a lot of AI applications dangerous and irresponsible. And I still find that a lot of AI tools are extremely undercooked. But what I was able to accomplish in this experiment was nothing short of amazing. I can only hope that the future of AI is ethical, responsible, and well-regulated. But young Reginald's everlasting pessimism still exists within me today. That, however, is a topic for another day. If you'd like a full process guide on how to replicate this experiment for yourself, I'll link Michelle Huang's Twitter thread in the video description, and I'll leave a pinned comment down below outlining the general steps that I took personally. Anyway, I hope that this video has inspired you in some sort of way. Whether that's to do with AI, mental health, or to just simply take a moment and be thankful. I sincerely wish that my experience opens up some new doors for you, just like it did for me. If you enjoyed this video essay, don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content similar to this. I make videos about all things writing related. I'd also like to thank my patron, Edith Lopez Torres, for helping make this video happen. If you'd like to support me further, please check out my Patreon. I'll leave a link down in the description below. And if you've got some time, check out some of my other videos too. I really appreciate you watching this one. And to everyone who made it to the end here, thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.